Hey, hello, everyone. This is our school building committee meeting for Thursday, October 24, 2024. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve. The first is from the August 6th meeting.
I would make a
Yes,
motion.
August 6th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the August 6 minutes? Thank you, Mary. Is there a second? Kathy? Any corrections or updates? Then all in favor of approving the August 6 minutes, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? Chris McNabo will abstain. Okay. Then we have minutes from the September 26th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Kathy, thank you. And then second, Steve. Any corrections to these? Okay, then all in favor of approving the September 26th minutes, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, Chris, again, abstain.
I'm going to abstain also, Randy. Mary.
Okay, all right, Mary abstain. Okay, that brings us to the opportunity for public input. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the committee? Don't see anyone, so we will move on then to the OPM update.
Good evening, everyone. So a lot and later on in the docket in terms of just some of the procurement items and some initial wave, if you will, of some cleanup motions based on some of the financial closeout and coordination between Colliers and town finance, which has been going well. But for this part, I would point out in the committee packet, there are a number of field reports from Fuss and O'Neill to the thankfully ongoing retention basin work. So generally positive news so far, insofar as taking out the existing soil, putting the protections in place, protecting around the trees, following the scope of the work insofar as removing the soil. And Fuss and O'Neill has been out there every other day to monitor the work. Basically the work is slated to be approximately 4 weeks long, and they have 14 visits in their contract. So what we discussed at the working group meeting is an every other day schedule to best use the time and make sure things are going along well. There is the first milestone test at the bottom of the basin that was supposed to occur yesterday, but there was a mix up with the testing lab, so that's getting rescheduled. But basically to reconfirm that the subgrade is draining as intended. So if you recall back from the original Newfield construction, we did a series of tests at the basin, and pretty consistently the natural subgrade soil below the sort of the scope of work, if you will, always drained very well. And so that's why we had the discussions back and forth about the basin itself. But the subgrade was always fine. So this is the first step, just to reconfirm that it's still fine before they go and build back up soil, ultimately leading to hopefully the final in situ condition at the basin once the new soil is put back on. So that's the first milestone there, but otherwise the removal of the existing soil is complete. So we're just waiting to get into that second phase. Any questions on that front?
It was surprising to me that there was still water in there when that was started.
The actual work,
yes.
They had to pump out. Yeah.
Yeah. Kate, has it been disruptive for you, or is it going okay?
It's not been disruptive at all. It's been fine. They've been really accommodating. We had a fire drill while they were here, and Fire Week, they worked with us. So exceptional team to work with. No complaints.
Great. Questions on that, on the retention basin work? Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a, the picture that you sent, Adam, where the trees are kind of on little plateaus or buttes. How much soil is going to be put back in there? How much? I guess it's not soil, it's material. How much is back in?
So
There we
The
go.
answer is, I believe it's 8 inches. It's 8 to 12. I'd have to pull up the drawings, but we have 24 existing, which is what these little mesa buttes are. And so it'll be less than that, so that these would get graded out proportionately to provide so it's not a plateau in the middle of the basin, but it's, I believe it's 8 or 10 inches, 8 to 12 inches that's getting put back. In the
Okay.
areas between the trees. I can pull that up while we're,
Okay.
okay.
Is there any assessment of the soil that was there that being appropriate or not appropriate?
If you recall, we did do some testing back when it was still in construction, and if I recall, and I know this is being recorded, but don't quote me on this. If I recall, the results were that the material itself wasn't necessarily inappropriate insofar as its composition. I believe that was the initial take. We did not pursue additional levels of testing because we were right to be in the middle of negotiations, and then that all became a moot point.
Okay. Any other questions on this before we move on? Do you have a timeline for the remaining work? I mean, we had good weather, which is very helpful.
Yes. So yes, the like I said, it was about 4 weeks, and they had started on the 14th. So we are approximately 40% of the way through. So I would expect the main work to be complete probably the second week of November, again, weather permitting. The notion is that everything, including any sort of last cleanup items or anything like that, would be done before the Thanksgiving holiday. And we're still on track to do that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Any other questions on the basin work? Otherwise, that's by and large the scope of the update. Then, Chris, I did just look it up. It's 12 inches of retention basin soil.
Thank you.
I'm flashing that on the screen now.
Adam, just kind of debating whether or not to bring this up in the meeting, but I think it would be good just for posterity. So in one of the reports, you and I connected earlier in the day because I had my own question on this. One of the field notes reports had a recording in there about a pocket, quote unquote, I think that was the term used, a pocket of silt that was in the sub basin, or sorry, in the basin, and my mind's eye reading the word pocket was it was a sort of small confined area of the overall area that would be draining, and I reached out to you to confirm that that's a reasonable understanding, and that while we might have debates all day long about whether or not there should have been a pocket of silt that ended up there, based on erosion or bank stabilization or where that silt came from, you indicated that you wouldn't have expected that would impact the performance of the basin, that the area that had silt was not the root cause of water basically failing to drain. Is that accurate?
Generally, yes. So I'm showing on the screen what Ryan is referring to from the latest Fuss and O'Neill report. So this is at the outlet from the stormwater main that comes from basically the rest of the site. So if there was silt getting into small inlets and catch basins along the site, it may find its way here. So I'm not shocked that there might be a siltier area at the outlet from this pipe. What's kind of cut off here is the rest of the basin. So the point I was making to Ryan when he and I were discussing earlier is, even if this were to be detrimental, and we'd find that out based off of some forthcoming Fuss and O'Neill observations and the testing that's going to be done here. You can see where one of these tests is in the general area, is where it's going to be targeted. Even if this were to be let's call it an issue, that wouldn't affect the entirety of the rest of the basin, way over here. Even if it's silty here, that's not going to prevent water draining over in this rate. So again, I'll look to Fuss and O'Neill to determine if there's something that needs to be done now. But in terms of just kind of looking backward, the by and large, the overwhelming majority of the subgrade didn't appear to be overly silty based on Fuss and O'Neill's initial report. So I don't think there's a correlation there between the overall non-performance and this one observation.
Thank you.
Chris McAvoy?
Not to beat a dead horse, but could we assume that the compaction was the bigger problem rather than the soil then?
I'm gonna take a political response here and not make a determination, but
Fair enough.
that was one of the items that was discussed as siltation versus compaction versus something else. So I don't think that's been wholeheartedly ruled out one way or the other. But for moving forward, it is a focus for when they put the new 12 inches of soil in. That's why Fuss is out there every other day. We're doing the in situ tests right as soon as they're done placing it, that kind of thing, to eliminate that for being a concern for the rest of the lifetime of this basin until, later on.
Okay, Steve?
I'm guessing they didn't dig around the trees because they're trying not to disturb the roots of those trees. But is that being penny wise, pound foolish? Like, looks like there's a number of trees and it's a pretty big diameter around them. Is that going to significantly impact the performance of the retention basin, or
So
it'll work the way it's supposed to with all that original non-suitable material still in place?
So this came up when formulating the scope, and Collier's working with Fuss and O'Neill and with Derek Delay at the town, at Town Engineering, to come up with what the scope should be to maintain the spirit of the low impact development and the authorization that was previously granted by the town for this work. Also with, like you're pointing out, what makes sense to make sure the drainage. And so this scope was the resultant to not just have, for example, a small trench going through there to be drainage, trying to maximize the amount of new soil and new condition to allow for drainage, but still maintain the existing trees there without getting so close to them that, yeah, like to your point, they damage the root ball. I'll admit those trees are hardier than I think I would have given them credit for, with the amount that they've survived. So the fact that they're still living is a testament to good tree selection. And so since they are still viable as of now, that was the intent, is wanting to still protect them. We do have heavy equipment going on there. Don't want to risk getting too close, but still not just have a narrow valley of new soil, have a decent cross section across the basin that has new material for drainage.
Okay, then I guess we can move on to the next topic.
All right, so the next agenda item is on procurement, and it's there are two items, one for reference where there's no vote needed, and then the second where there is a motion before the committee for this evening. So I'll share my screen again here. So the first one for reference was something that was approved on an expedited basis with Peter, Randy, and Ryan for BSC Group, who had done surveying for the town at multiple points throughout the project. This is $2,000 for survey staking along that southern property line with the neighbors in anticipation of some fence work. So again, no vote needed here, but just as part of reporting back to the SBC on project funds, that was something that was approved. And the staking supposed to occur earlier this week, but the field crew member got ill, so I'm still waiting to hear back on schedule. But this work is ongoing, or will be ongoing. It does correlate to the second item for which there is a motion, which is Richter Seekin, who was the landscape architect under TSKP and has also been previously retained by the town for the draft playground work that's still ongoing for design. This proposal was for effectively comprehensive services for a potential new screening fence to cover the unfenced portion of that southern property line between the school property, that woods area, and the neighbors to the south. If you looked at this proposal that's in the packet, there was a portion of it that has been previously approved under a similar expedited basis by Randy, Ryan, and Peter to get the work to get started. For the investigation of existing conditions and review existing grade, basically to get the lay of the land for what the scope would be, and to develop design sketches. That work combined was $7,100, so underneath the $10,000 limit. Again, the intent there was to get the process moving, so that work could potentially start sooner. However, the remaining portions have not yet been approved. To kind of get ahead of a potential question, the reason we're looking at Richter-Segan for fencing is because there is a change to this, basically the site plan that was approved by planning and zoning for the overall school project, and confirmed with the planning and zoning department that there would need to be some level of sort of reapproval, which would require design documents rather than just going out and getting a company to give you a quote for some fencing and then putting out fencing. So that's the reason why we're entertaining Richter-Segan in the first place. They're familiar with the site. They've done the first round of fencing. They have the specs. So it should be more turnkey to develop the documents than having someone cold come in. That said, like I mentioned, 7,100 was for the first authorization, but we couldn't go beyond that without eclipsing the $10,000 limit on the expedited approval. So the motion before the committee tonight is in the draft motions is for $5,920 for this task 3 construction document phase that would actually finish off the stamped documents that could then be approved to allow the work to proceed from a regulatory permitting perspective. You can see that there are 3 other tasks that Richter-Segan provided quotes on, 4, 5, and 6, for bidding and construction administration, going out there while they're putting in the fence and dealing with any issues, and closeout. The notion is that those scope items might not be needed to, we might not need Richter-Segan to perform those work. That might be undertaken by some combination of town staff or what have you, rather than having them do the work and potentially incurring the costs when it may or may not be needed. I saw that, Ryan, I think you put something in the chat about.
Yeah, so the update there, yeah, so just a quick note, obviously, the town has faith and confidence and appreciates the support that Colliers has been providing at every turn, but under the leadership of our new facilities management director, Mike Pasacco, our facilities department is pretty confident that we can provide primary project oversight for this effort in-house without having the lead sort of for project management be outsourced, so to speak. So, and obviously that's being done as a cost-cutting option here.
So the way the motion is crafted is for this this task 3 only, to add it to the PO to get past the point where the proverbial stamp drawings are needed, and then potentially hand it over to town staff to finalize the procurement and oversight.
The part I'm wondering about is if 2 neighbors agree that they want to have a fence between them, do they really have to go to the town approval, through town approval, to make it happen, as long as it's within, it's not a whatever, I don't know what, non-conforming fence structure. How necessary is this actually?
So that's a good question.
In order to be, anyway, go ahead, please.
So the reason why it would go through a town process would be because it is effectively a public commercial site plan versus a private residential. So I'm not caught up on Mansfield's zoning regulations for private fencing and residential fencing, but typically in Connecticut for land use regulations, anything that's not a private residential structure that has some public facing component of it, if you're meaningfully changing the overall plan, then that would need to be reviewed and approved. So that way a company doesn't move next door to a residential area, puts up a giant wall, and everyone's upset because there wasn't some oversight there. Obviously, that's not what the project is doing, but that's why we asked the question, to see if this would trigger some sort of site plan confirmation, even if it wasn't a full-blown hearing or what have you. And planning and zoning did confirm that the regulations do require some level of drawings to make that confirmation, because it's a commercial and or public property.
Chris, you're
You're muted, Chris.
muted, Chris.
You say some level of drawings, but those drawings now would be completed by the town?
The drawings would be completed by Richter Seekin via this proposal as a landscape architect to stamp the documents. We did explore to what level town staff could potentially do some of this work, but the actual creating of the documents was not something that could be undertaken, is my understanding. So
Okay,
hence this proposal.
all right, thanks for your efforts in that.
Okay, so is there, are there other questions, first of all? Then is there a motion to increase this PO that someone would care to make?
You can make that motion, Randy.
Great, Mary.
I would move to increase PO 25001849 for Richter and Seegan by $5,920 for task 3 fence design construction documents per their proposal dated July 15th, 2024, for a new total of $13,040.
Thank you. Is there a second? Rich, thank you. Then all in favor of the motion, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions?
I just can't help but think and say that this is a good one for notes to memo file. Put the fence all the way around and then reduce when you need to.
Okay, so then that passes. Thank you, Chris. Okay,
All right, then I'll reshare my screen for the invoices portion. We can start off with the typical invoice packet, although it looks a little different than what I traditionally have seen or historically have seen. So the invoice packet itself, the top portion of it are the invoices like we've seen before, where they're new work that's being approved as part of ongoing services, namely the monthly Colliers bill, the first pay application for Earth Dynamics for the retention basin work, but largely they're the off-haul of the soil and a portion of their general conditions and that kind of thing. As well as the first 2 invoices for construction oversight from Fuss and O'Neill. So all that's typical in the way we've standard been reviewing invoices. The items down here below the gray line here are items that are part of that initial closeout and cleanup effort with town finance, where there were charges to the project that were made through standard course of business typically, but that never made it to Colliers for inclusion as an invoice to get approval by the SBC. So in following with the rules of, as I understand them for the referendum and the legal opinion that any project funds would need to go through the SBC, that's why they're being included in the invoice packet with the understanding for these invoices and charges that they would be submitted as part of the state reimbursement process, which is why I'm including them in the formal invoice packet here. Overwhelmingly, they're for historic bid and RFP advertising through the Hartford Courant. One was the initial wave of felt tiles. I think that Board of Education had purchased the test run, the 1 or 2 classrooms. Submitting that because that was ultimately found its way into the project general ledger budget, as well as some miscellaneous nurses cabinets that were procured for those spaces. Again, I don't know that how the state would interpret some of these purchases, if they would deem them eligible or ineligible. However, at this point, I don't see any reason not to attempt submission and let the state come back and confirm that they aren't reimbursable for some reason. Because we have the invoices, they are related to the programming of the building. So I see no reason why not to submit them. And We'll let the
Okay.
state make a determination.
So this is coming up because this is part of the closeout cleanup efforts that are ongoing.
Yes.
Okay, are there any questions regarding that topic? Chris, go ahead. Chris.
I'm glad to see that we are contributing to keeping our local newspapers alive because we have to advertise in such a manner here. But it's pretty interesting how that goes. But I support this.
Okay, so there
So
have been two different motions regarding these.
Yes, I did them in reverse order. Apologies. That's the second item is the motion relevant to what we just saw.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion regarding the invoice packet? Mary, thank you.
Sure, I would make a motion to approve the invoice packet dated today, October 24th, including invoices from Colliers, Earth Dynamics, Fuss and O'Neill, Feltright, Eastford Builders, and the Hartford Current for a total approval of $81,820.18.
Thank you. Is there a second? Kathy, thanks. Any final questions? Then all in favor of the motion, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay,
All right, the second item is just a general list. These are sort of the flip side of the coin for charges that came out of this cleanup process. You can see a lot of them are older pre-referendum charges, and the number of them were charges on the general ledger that for which there isn't an invoice available to go with them. I recall that right when construction was starting, the town, a number of finance directors ago, was going through a change in the system, and some of the charges, whether the invoice was not attached or lost in the system, what have you, there isn't an invoice available. So these were broken out separate from the ones in the bottom half of the invoice packet you just saw. And the motion here is to acknowledge them to be part of the project funds, again, following the referendum rules that the SPC approved the charges made to the project. But because they are either pre-referendum, they wouldn't be eligible anyway. So wanted to keep them compartmentalized, eligible for reimbursement, I mean. Or if there's no invoice available, then the state now requires a hard invoice be available for all charges being submitted for reimbursement. So there wouldn't be anything there to substantiate that request. So that's why these were kept separate from the other ones. So you see a couple of Hartford Currents, sometimes they're too old. You know, a couple of them didn't have an invoice available. That's why they're documented here. So we're tracking all the items. They're bucket A, or bucket B as we close out the miscellaneous charges that are on the general ledger.
okay. So are there other questions? Any questions on that? Mary?
So this is money we owe back to the town,
No,
correct?
no, I wouldn't. No, these are charges that were made to the project. So for example, like a typical Hartford Current bill, there was some catering and that, I guess, that occurred before my time a bit, that were project related, charged to the project budget. Colliers has been tracking most of these in our financial logs, but just never got the invoices to support them, so they never made it in a packet. And in these cases, for most of these, you can tell they just didn't have an invoice to give to Colliers to then put in front of the school building committee. So there's nothing owed. These vendors have been paid for years.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no new cost here, I guess is the clarifying way to say it. This is just a way to memorialize what monies are being attributed to the project versus charges that might go to some other town budget.
Gotcha. Thank you for
So
clarifying.
this is an acknowledgement that these are charged.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Say, if Tall Timbers Marketing has been waiting for their payment since 2019.
There's also a legal bill, listen now.
Yes. Checks in the mail, yeah.
Okay, so is there a motion then regarding this list of charges?
Sure, I can make a motion to approve the list of charges to the project from the town general ledger dated today, October 24th.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Steve, I think I saw first. Then all in favor of approving this motion, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, that's all unanimous.
As a final cleanup point, and I guess an update, if you will, on this closeout process. So those motions get us through the end of 2024. And so finance and myself are working on the remaining balance of 2024. I don't anticipate anywhere near the list of items that we saw there, just because it's been a different process for the last year or a couple of years. So if there are a few cleanup items, we might do something similar, but to be honest, I don't anticipate that level of either missing invoice or something to that effect. There are a number of vendors that still need some closing out. So for example, our stormwater monitoring agent supposedly has completed the work. I have their invoice, but I do not have their final report. So therefore their invoice isn't in the invoice packet. So I would expect that next month, for example. And I also have to work with town finance on some of the vendors that there may be an invoice that they haven't submitted. They've been bird dogged about it, but haven't received an invoice, sometimes in the case of years. So how does the town want to manage those purchase orders and closing out and that kind of thing? So again, that's still forthcoming, but this was 3 years worth of closeout versus the remaining year or so that we have left in terms of the general ledger reconciliation against the project budget.
Okay. I will just kind of alert the committee that we are required to put together a calendar for meetings for the next year. That will be coming to you probably next month. We're anticipating just scheduling the fourth Thursday of the month. So just one scheduled per month, and cancel as needed or not. But that'll be coming up probably at our next meeting.
You're only going to do it for a year? Maybe you should do it for like 4 or 5 years.
Well, funny you say that. We
1 year at a
have
time.
opportunities in our HVAC grant project. So if you are interested in serving on another building committee, you all have done an amazing job. Please let Ryan know, myself know. We'll be happy to usher you in through the application process with high marks. But as always, thank you for your service. I know this has been a long process, but we appreciate it.
An extraordinary level of dedication amongst these citizens. Anything else, Adam?
That's it for me.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, then I would accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Second, Mary. And with that, we are done, and we'll see you next time.
Great.
Take
Thank you,
care,
Randy.
everybody. Thank you.
Have a happy Halloween all.
Thanks.